if anything's going to break on this figure, it's probably going to be his back. Here's a look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman Knightfall Batman. As a child, Bruce Wayne watched as his parents were brutally killed in Gotham City's crime alley. Traumatized by their deaths, he devoted his life to becoming the world's greatest weapon against crime, the Batman. To become the ultimate vigilante, the Dark Knight disciplined his mind and body to reach the pinnacle of mental and physical superiority in his relentless pursuit of justice. Just before Bats goes to blows with Bane, let's go ahead and measure off the figure and see how tall it stands. Also, as well, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the brand new Batman Knightfall Batman that we could have a look at in this review. I'm also going to bring in, speaking of Bane, I'll bring him in and also in a moment, but Batman, including the points on the top of his cowl, of course, you want to include that. The figure's about 7 inches in height, or the figure's going to be about 17.5 centimeters tall. Yeah, speaking of Bane, let's go ahead and bring in the mega-sized Bane so you can see the comparisons between the two. Batman does seem a little short when you compare him against the behemoth of Bane, but he is also a bit short when you also compare him with some other Batman figures as well. Here's what he looks like with the Hush Batman, for example. And while some may say that the proportions of his head and his body seem a little too small, when you compare him, say, with the likes of Batman from Zur-En-Arrh, which for me is always the benchmark, that's the bar that gets set for me for a perfect-looking Batman. I think he's not actually that much different in size. His build is a little bit smaller, but really not that by much. And even if you look at the arms, it seems to be the case that the Batman from Knightfall is sharing the same arms that we got from Zur-En-Arrh. I also did want to bring in the Gold Label Edition Robin, so you can also see as well how a Robin stacks up with the Batman that we're about to have a look at. Regarding the figure's accessories, Batman comes included first with a trading card. The trading card, again, is using source material. In fact, I think this is actually one of the covers of the Knightfall. Knightfall had some questionable artwork. One of the things also very questionable is the length of Batman's ears. How can he even run around? I'd be running and ducking through tunnels if I had ears this long. But one thing that's nice is that, once again, we aren't getting figure photography. They seem to be going consistently now with the idea of using source material or artwork from the pages. Figure photography, I find, just doesn't work for trading cards. And while I'm happy to see that the front of it does have artwork, whether he has questionable long ears or not, if you, though, flip around to the back, I am a little downtrodden by the idea that Batman is still using a paragraph that we've already gotten with already tons of Batman cards before. It's basically just a generic read-up that, once again, Batman's lost his parents, and he, of course, trains and becomes the Cape Crusader that we all know and love now. But I kind of wish that there could have been some reference to Bane, some mentioning of the breaking of the bat. But there's nothing really there to report other than just a simple same paragraph read that we always get countless times already. I still will be happy to put this in my trading card sheets, along with the other cards that have now source material. Keep that consistent, McFarlane, and keep moving forward with the idea of actually using artwork. The figure also comes included with, of course, a display stand, a circular black stand with the DC logo printed down below here, and one neighboring peg, as always the case, that can plug into the underside of either one of Bats' boots. I'm going to move that to the side. Bit of disclosure by the person behind the camera. I have already taken the luxuries of actually detaching one of the hands from the forearms. The figure technically out of packaging comes with 2 gripping hands. So this one is what he would have had also then on the other side. I've already taken the liberty of actually removing one of those hands from the forearms. What the original one was a closed fist. And that's good, of course, if you're punching bad guys. But if, for example, you wanted to have Batman, say, displayed with his Batarang, one of the next accessories we're going to be having a look at, let's go ahead. We already started on this side, after all. Let's go ahead and remove this hand from the forearm. To change the hands are pretty easy. You just line everything up to the peg, pop that in place. Although sometimes you do have the peg moving back and forth on you. Get the hands in place, and now he actually has the means to store, or hold at least, the Batarang. Speaking of Batarangs, obviously, the figure comes included with one. It's blue, so it's matching the colors of his cowl, cape, and gloves, and boots, and his underoos as well. And I'm actually happy to see that they've actually used a fairly, not super thick Batarang. If you go back and look at some of those earlier Batman figures we've gotten, like, the Batarangs are way too thick. They were like silver saucers you'd expect to serve like food and stuff on top of it. And actually, this one is a little easier on the hands to hold. And obviously to hold these, now that we've already taken the liberty of actually removing the hands and changing them, simply just take the batarang and pop it into his hand. You want to, of course, make sure that you've got it far enough into his grip. Not that you necessarily will be tipping the figure upside down, but if you at least have it far enough in there, yeah, you can tip it upside down, and the batarang's not going to end up onto the floor. That's already happened a couple of times already. So he comes included with that, and that's the only other thing, unfortunately, other than just his hands and the batarang. That's the only thing that comes included with the figure, which I guess is a bit of a bummer. I would have liked to have seen some other accessories get included with these figures, but what's at least the takeaway from this is we got ourselves one of the best looking Batman I think we've ever gotten from, again, that's coming from somebody that likes the Batman Zur-En-Arrh, and that's my go-to Batman. Even though he doesn't have, of course, the traditional looking Batman cape and costume colors, that's my go-to Batman when it comes to my favorite sculpt. And I might even just say that this one actually trumps the one that we did get from Zur-En-Arrh. I think it's just a good-looking head sculpt. And I think we actually are getting this guy again, but with the black shadowing here on the front of his face. That may or may not be a San Diego Comic-Con 2023 exclusive, which I hope to get my hands on. Costume-wise, I think it's going to be exactly the same, but they're going to be adding, again, like additional black shadowing, which I kind of would like to see on a future Batman figure. I mean, obviously, it starts to cause the problem if you have one Batman figure that's just the plastic coloring on your shelf, and then you've got the one that has the additional shadowing. How far do we go with the idea of that? Maybe only do that one or two Batman figures, and maybe, if anything, do that with a gold label edition, keeping just the regular plastic colors just as you see right now. But, like from a head sculpt standpoint, I'm really happy with how this one turned out. Traditional colors of blue and gray. Although I will say, though, about the gray, I think the gray is a little too light. I would have maybe gone a darker shade, maybe not to the level of, let's say, for example, bring in the Hush Batman. Maybe that's too dark of a gray. Somewhere in between, I think, would be the ideal color for this costuming. I think maybe like the gray might be a tad bit too light, but I like the color of the blue. I think the blue works quite well. The coloring on his face, for, again, what the lower half of his face at least, is colored nicely. And you've got the outlined areas of the white eyes. So, again, like the really well executed Batman. He does have the emblem, which is actually interesting to see that it's not just painted onto the body. It is actually a sculpted piece that they've actually lifted over top. So like his torso obviously would have probably been used from other Batmans or other figures before, and then they would have had to probably tool this differently, obviously adding the emblem there on the front of it. I like the idea that the emblem is actually separate and not just painted into place. He has traditionally more of a classic-looking utility belt, brightly handled here in yellow, and again, you've got the nice colors of the blue both in his gloves, his underoos, and of course the back of his cape. The cape, I will say, is one thing, is really something I like about the figure. It's still a soft plastic. I know some people would really prefer they get away from the idea of using plastic capes and instead using cloth capes. I myself prefer plastic because it just kind of keeps a more consistent looking sculpting of the mold. When you have fabric works okay, I feel, for like a superpowers figures or maybe sometimes movie figures, but I think if you want to just have kind of a consistent look to the front sculpting, sometimes it's a bit jarring, to flip it around to the back and you see like a figure that just has a cloth cape that doesn't really have any sculpting to the folds or anything like that. They've added some additional darker gray or darker kind of a blue added into the little sort of canaled areas of the cape, but I like the cape. I think it's handled quite well. And of course, if you want to look at the back of Batman's behind, that's what it looks like. It's actually a lot more sculpted than I was expecting. He's a fairly tapered off Batman. Very narrow in the waist, very narrow, in fact, also in the legs, but he doesn't look sickly. He looks like he's muscular, but he's just a little leaner of a Batman. For the articulation on this guy, let's start first with his head sculpt. It does rotate all the way around. It's on a ball joint after all, so you can have the head looking up, which is actually a lot higher than I was expecting. The head does also look down, only to about there. You can also rock the head back and forth as well. The arms, once again, give you about 90 degrees on a bend. And again, you can rotate as well those arms at the shoulder sockets. They do also have swivels on the biceps, so that's there as well. Double hinging on the elbow. The hands also rotate, just with obviously these hands I did swap out, but they work the same way. They swivel all the way around. You can also hinge them back and forth as well. I did want to say, though, on my wrists, my wrists, not these wrists, although these wrists are kind of giving me problems, but the wrists on Batman are a little on the more looser side, so I don't know if I can probably go in there and tighten that up, but at least it's happy to report that everything else on the figure is quite tight. So he's got a ball joint at the top of his torso, But then at the bottom, where his abdomen is, hiding underneath, obviously, his utility belt, he does also have a secondary ball joint. So you can get some good motions and moving that way as well. Figures have, once again, this figure has a ratcheted joint at the top of his thigh. You can take the legs and move them forward. You can move them back. Now, like his trunks, some actually have said like his trunks are a little on the smaller side. I don't mind the fact that they're as small as they are. I mean, I don't think that I would have made them a lot bigger. When you get figures with lower torsos like this, at least like the lower trunks, when you make them too big, sometimes they do come across like figure diapers, which is sometimes what people refer to them as. I think it's actually a good size. I mean, it does make them look a little small, but it does, I think, fit better with the proportions of this particular Batman. The only thing about it, though, is moving the forward and back motions on the legs. Sometimes, though, it does end up crimping some of the softer plastic that they would have used for the trunk. So you might have to kind of find yourself going in there and fishing out some of the trunks that have gotten tucked in there. Legs do swivel at the top of the thigh. The figure does have a double hinge on the knee. He doesn't have any articulation here for the boot. It seems to be the case that it's just one continuous sculpt from the rest of his calf. But his ankles do move back and forth. They also do rock back and forth this way. And the figure, once again, does have toe articulation. I know some people get really excited with toe articulation. All in all, like a good-looking Batman. The only thing I would say from a figure standpoint is, let me just get this guy to just stand a little bit. Is just from mine alone, I've noticed he is a little on the loose side, maybe on the wrists, and a little bit on more so like that ankle. But other than that, like it's a good looking Batman. And the only thing I would say, like, I wish he could have come include with some other accessories as well, because usually is the case when it comes to these figures that they scale them back when it comes to the things that they pack along with them. So like Batman will still get your traditional trading card, he'll still get the display stand, nothing's changing in that department. But I do kind of wish he could have come include with something other than just one Batarang. Maybe throw in a couple of other accessories also in there as well, but from a figure sculpt standpoint, it's the best Batman I think we've ever gotten. Now that we finally have ourselves a true Knightfall Batman, for those that have been waiting to recreate the scene of the breaking of the bat by the hands of Bane, you can now do it. Although, to be honest, I think the figure's too good to be relegated to be across the knee of Bane. I would much rather just have the figure displayed on my shelf. But it did leave me one idea in mind. If McFarlane obviously wanted to get the most mileage out of these molds, why not release a Batman Bane Knightfall set? You could re-release the Bane, as you see right now, maybe brighten up the colors of his mask, because one of the notable things about this mega-sized Bane was the fact that the colors of his mask I thought were too dark of a gray. I would much rather a brighter white mask for Bane, and why not package along with Bane this Batman, but with rips and tears visibly painted into his suit, and then a little more anguish on his face. I would love to get a set like that. But what do you guys think of Knightfall Batman? Is this, first of all, a figure that you've already had the chance to pick up and add to your collection, or is this a figure that you would definitely like to pick up and add to your collection? I did already mention also that I think this guy's getting a San Diego Comic-Con release that's basically going to be essentially the same figure, but just the shadowing that's been added on the front of his cowl, and I think it's also added in his cape as well. Really looking forward to getting my hands on that Batman also. Once again, a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the brand new McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Knightfall Batman's Batman. I probably didn't need to even add Batman, Knightfall, Batman. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, want to hit with a like. Why not? If you guys are enjoying the content, you certainly do want to stick around for more DC Multiverse. We are going to, by the way, be looking at some more stuff courtesy of the folks over at McFarlane Toys, so those will be coming up in upcoming reviews. The key, of course, to making sure that you're not missing out on any of that by, of course, hitting the obvious subscribe button and the very obvious bell notification, and keeping your peepers peeled to this channel on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.